I stood still beneath the bright fluorescent lights of Hartsfield-Jackson Airport, the world rushing around me like I didn't exist. Travelers laughed into cell phones, wheeled bags clattered over the tile floors, voices echoed over the intercom. And I, Blake Ashford, 69 years old, recently widowed, stood with nothing but a thin sweater on my shoulders and a printed itinerary that now felt like a cruel joke. Marla had looked me straight in the eye, if you can call it, looking when you're smirking over your shoulder, and said, "You've got a phone, Blake. Sell it. That should cover a Greyhound fare, right?" She laughed like it was clever. Like abandoning your mother-in-law at an airport with no luggage, no return ticket, and no dignity was just one of those practical family decisions. Celeste didn't say a word. She didn't need to. She'd already turned away, adjusting the strap of her purse, eyes hidden behind oversized sunglasses, trailing behind Marla like a loyal shadow. Together they glided toward the security line, first-class tags dangling from their suitcases, hair freshly blown out, heels clicking without hesitation. Not even a backward glance. I wanted to call out to ask if this was some kind of mistake. Surely I'd misunderstood. Surely someone had forgotten something. But my voice caught in my throat, brittle and useless, as if saying anything out loud would make the humiliation even more real. So I did what I had always done. In moments like this, I stayed quiet. Too proud to beg, too stunned to sit, too hurt to cry. I tightened my grip on my purse like it was a lifeline, though all it held was my wallet, my phone, and a few mints I'd packed for the flight I was no longer taking. My suitcase, small, packed with care, with my husband Walter's photo, wrapped in a towel, was gone. Checked at curbside, Marla had insisted. "Let us handle it, Blake. Just relax," she'd said with a forced smile. I'd wanted to believe her. Now all I had left was that folder of travel documents, the boarding pass that had been voided at the counter, and a growing sense that this trip had never been meant for me. A young mother passed by with a toddler tugging at her coat. The child's eyes met mine for a moment, curious, then confused, and I turned away. I didn't want to be seen like this. A woman without a plan, without a seat, without a place in the family she thought she belonged to. I walked slowly toward a bench tucked beneath a large window, my legs stiff and unfamiliar, like they belonged to someone else. I sat with my back straight, chin lifted, as if that might hold the pieces of me together a little longer. And then I reached into the inner pocket of my purse, the one I hadn't touched since Walter's funeral, and felt the edge of something solid, something I had kept, not out of hope, but out of habit. A card, a name, a possibility. Walter died on a Thursday. It was cloudy that morning, the kind of sky that presses in on you. We'd been married 43 years. Not perfect years, not easy ones, but full stacked with routines, shared meals, inside jokes, and the quiet understanding of people who've chosen each other every single day. When the paramedics took him, I stood in the doorway barefoot, holding his coffee mug, still half full and warm in my hands. The funeral was small. He never liked fuss. Celeste gave a speech that sounded polished but distant. Marla cried the loudest. Afterward, people brought casseroles and flowers, and then, like they always do, they left. The silence in the house was so heavy, it clung to the walls. 2 weeks later, Celeste came by with Marla. I was still wearing one of Walter's old flannel shirts over my nightgown, sitting in the sunroom, where the light always hit his chair just right. Mom Celeste said, easing into the seat across from me, "We've been thinking. Maybe you should get away for a bit. Clear your head." Marla nodded like it was her idea. "Florida. Just a few days. Spring break with the kids. It could be good for you." Good for me. I wanted to laugh, but my throat was too dry. They said Walter would have wanted me to breathe, to see the ocean again, to get out of the house where everything reminded me of what I'd lost. Maybe they were right. I hadn't been farther than the grocery store in weeks. I missed the sound of waves the way salt air wrapped around your skin. So, I said yes. Later that night, I opened Walter's drawer and found the old pocket watch he'd carried when we first met. It didn't tick anymore. I sold it at a pawn shop down the street for $600. The man behind the counter didn't ask questions, just handed me the cash and looked away when he saw my hands trembling. I added that to the envelope already holding the $600 I'd tucked away from last year's tax refund. It felt good to contribute to be needed. When Marla mentioned everyone was pitching in, I wanted to believe I was part of that everyone. I packed slowly. A photo of Walter from our 25th anniversary. My softest scarf. A paperback I'd been meaning to finish for years. And one of his handkerchiefs folded neatly in the outer pocket. The morning of the flight, I placed everything in a small rolling bag and zipped it shut. Then I picked up the envelope of money and handed it to Celeste, who took it with a quick nod and didn't meet my eyes. The morning of the trip, the air felt heavier than it should have. Celeste pulled into my driveway 10 minutes early, honked once, and waited with the engine running. I double-checked my bag, smoothed my scarf, and kissed the photo of Walter I'd tucked into the front pocket. I wanted to believe this would be good. Needed to. At the airport, we barely had time to breathe. Marla rushed ahead, motioning to the curbside check-in, like she'd done this 100 times. "Let us handle it, Blake," she said, her tone all sugar and teeth. "You just relax." I hesitated. I'd really rather keep it with me. It's just one bag. Celeste put a hand on my arm. "Mom, you're fine. You don't want to drag that through security. We'll check it with ours. It's easier. Easier. For them." I let it go, handed the handle to the attendant, and watched it disappear behind the conveyor flap. I told myself it was nothing. Inside, the line moved slowly. I clutched my folder with the itinerary, boarding pass, and ID, everything neatly organized the way Walter would have done it. When we reached the desk, I handed my papers over and smiled at the attendant. She scanned them, then frowned. "I'm sorry, ma'am," she said, tapping her keyboard. "It looks like this return flight has been voided." "Voided?" I tried to keep my voice calm. There must be some mistake. She checked again, her fingers moving faster. "No return booking under your name. Do you have another confirmation?" Behind me, Celeste and Marla were already walking toward the security line. I turned, calling after them. "Celeste, my ticket." Marla stopped and turned halfway, clearly annoyed. "We only booked you one way, Blake," she said, as if I should have known. "You're retired. You've got time. You'll figure it out." Celeste didn't look at me. Just adjusted her sunglasses and kept walking. I stood frozen for a moment, boarding pass still clutched in my hand like a useless map. I considered calling Marianne, Walter's sister. She lived an hour from the city, but what would I say? That I'd been left behind by my own daughter. That I was the mother no one wanted to take home. I didn't call. I couldn't. Instead, I stepped out of the line, walked slowly to the side, and sat down near a window facing the tarmac. A plane took off in the distance, lifting into the sky with purpose, while I remained on the ground, blinking against the weight in my chest. I sat near the wide window where sunlight poured in without warmth. My hands were folded in my lap, motionless. Around me, the airport hummed and buzzed flight announcements, laughter, the dull roll of luggage wheels against tile. But inside, everything had gone still. I didn't cry. Not because I wasn't hurt, but because the pain was lodged too deep to surface. I thought of the last time I had felt this invisible. I was 9 years old, sitting on the front steps of my grandmother's house, waiting for a father who promised he'd be back by dinner. He never came back. No call, no note, just silence that stretched out so long it changed the shape of my hope. That was the first time I learned that love doesn't always come with return tickets. Now, decades later, I was learning it again from my own daughter. Celeste hadn't even looked at me when they walked away. Not even a trace of conflict in her face. Just distance. Like I was a burden she'd carried long enough. Walter used to say, "Some people confuse love with obligation. You'll know the difference when they stop pretending." I think I finally understood what he meant. I reached into my purse for a tissue and felt something firmer than paper. A small rectangle wedged into the side pocket, smooth, familiar. I pulled it out. It was a business card slightly worn at the edges, Julian Rain's attorney at law. Walter had given it to me years ago, back when we were updating our wills. "If anything ever happens," he'd said, "and I'm not there to fix it, call Julian. He'll take care of you." I had forgotten I even had it, but there it was, tucked beside a peppermint and a half-used grocery list, like it had been waiting. I traced the edge of the card with my thumb, letting its weight anchor me. I might have been left behind, but I wasn't powerless. Not completely. I slipped the card back into my wallet, stood up slowly, and walked toward the sliding doors. Outside, cabs lined up in neat rows. I stepped toward the first one, my hand tightening on the purse strap across my chest. I gave the driver an address I hadn't spoken in years. The cab ride to Julian's office took just under 30 minutes. The driver didn't speak much, and I didn't offer conversation. I kept the window cracked, letting the early spring air hit my face, sharp and clean. Somewhere behind us, Celeste and Marla were boarding their flight to Florida, likely settling into their first-class seats, sipping something cold and expensive, posting filtered photos that said, "Family time," with a caption that didn't include me. Julian's office hadn't changed since the last time Walter and I had visited. Same worn leather chairs, same framed diplomas, and aging photo of his dog on the shelf behind his desk. He stood when I walked in, surprised but warm. "Blake," he said, shaking my hand with both of his. "It's been a while. I was so sorry to hear about Walter." I nodded. "Thank you. I'm here because I need to make changes to my will." He raised an eyebrow, but didn't ask questions. Julian had known Walter well enough to know I didn't do anything impulsively. I sat down, pulled out the small notebook I'd used to list every account, every asset, every detail I could remember on the cab ride over. He took it from me, reading silently, then began typing. "I want Celeste and Marla removed entirely," I said. "No partial shares, no fallback rights. Nothing." "Understood," he replied, fingers pausing just long enough to register the weight of it. "I want everything House Investments land to go to Silver Harbor. They're a non-profit that provides housing and legal aid to abandoned seniors. I have their paperwork in here." I handed him the pamphlet I'd picked up months ago at the community center, never imagining I'd be filling it in for myself. He looked at me carefully. "You're sure?" "I've never been more sure." He nodded, and the clicking of his keyboard resumed. We went line by line, every beneficiary, every clause, every line of text that once assumed a daughter's care and gratitude. I struck it all cleanly and without hesitation. When it was done, I asked for everything to be notarized, sealed, and stored at his office, accessible only by him and a designated executor. I named from the nonprofit's legal counsel. I didn't want a single hand from my family touching what I'd worked to protect. I want it fireproof, password protected, and off limits to everyone else. "Even if they come asking, they won't get past me," he said. I stood to leave my new folder in hand and felt something I hadn't felt since before Walter died control. Not over what had happened, but over what would happen next. Outside, the sun had shifted slightly in the sky. I stepped into its light without blinking and called another cab this time, giving the name of a motel across town. Modest, quiet, temporary. Just long enough to rest before the next decision. I waited 3 days before I went back. Midweek, mid-morning, when I knew Celeste and Marla would be at work, and the neighbors too distracted to notice a truck parked in my driveway. I'd called a moving company from 2 counties over, paid in cash, and told them I'd only be taking a few things. They didn't ask questions. That was part of why I chose them. The house felt smaller when I stepped inside. Not physically, its bones were still the same, but emotionally, as if I no longer fit inside its corners. The air was stale. The silence no longer felt sacred. I walked through each room with purpose. I didn't linger. I didn't touch anything that didn't matter. From the living room, I took Walter's chair, the one that molded to his back after decades of reading. From our bedroom, I packed his navy cap, a box of letters he'd written, and the quilt my mother stitched for us on our wedding day. From the closet, I pulled out the wedding album, the spine worn, the cover soft from years of holding. The rest I left. The dining table where we used to host Sunday dinners. The china we never used after Walter got sick. The mattress we replaced together when he insisted I deserved better sleep. When the movers finished loading, I left the keys in a sealed envelope on the kitchen counter. Next to it, I placed a folded note. 3 short words, handwritten in clean script. Don't call. Don't ask. I closed the door quietly behind me and didn't look back. The ride to Willow Glen took just under 2 hours, though it felt longer in the best way. Like distance was doing what time had failed to, untangling me from the pieces of myself I'd been pretending still belonged to other people. Willow Glen sat just outside the city, tucked between 2 tall oaks and a row of tidy gardens. I'd toured it once with Walter years ago, back when he insisted we be prepared for anything. I told him I'd never live anywhere but our home. He smiled then and said, maybe one day, if the right place shows up. He would have liked this place. It didn't smell like medicine or neglect. It smelled like lemon soap and sunlit windows. The staff greeted me by name. My unit was small but warm, with a window that opened onto a courtyard full of daffodils. When I placed Walter's chair near that window and sat down, I didn't feel like a woman who had lost everything. I felt like a woman who had finally arrived. 6 months passed without a sound from them. Not a call, not a note, not even one of those strained obligatory texts on holidays. At Willow Glen, silence wasn't a punishment, it was peace. My days were full in ways that had nothing to do with obligation. I joined the book circle on Wednesdays, where we argued about characters like they were family. I painted again poorly, freely, with color that bled outside the lines. I learned the names of people who remembered mine. It was the first time in years I felt wanted without cost. Then one morning, I opened my email and saw a name I hadn't seen since the day they walked away from me at the airport. Celeste Monroe. Subject line, please read, Mom. I didn't open it at first. Instead, I turned off the screen, made a cup of tea, and sat near the open window. Outside, the courtyard was blooming new flowers in every corner. A breeze drifted through the screen, soft and clean, and I let it fill the room before turning the laptop back on. 16 missed calls. All from Celeste. The email was short, almost apologetic. I don't know what to say, Mom. Tanya and I got the letter from the lawyer today. We didn't think you'd actually go through with it. Maybe we made a mistake. Maybe we didn't realize how hurt you were. But to cut us out completely after everything, please at least let us keep the garden. The kids helped plant it. It means something. We're not perfect, but we're still your family. Can we talk 5 minutes? That's all I'm asking. I read it once. Then again. They hadn't called when Walter died. They hadn't checked when I stopped returning messages. But the moment their names vanished from the will, their voices returned. The garden. That was what they wanted. The garden behind the house Walter and I built. The same garden Celeste never asked me to help water. The one she posted photos of online, calling it her sanctuary, never mentioning who planted the original roses. Now it mattered. Now it meant something. I closed the laptop gently, not with anger, but finality. I could still remember the scent of those roses. I had tended them once, long before they became someone else's backdrop, but they were never what I chose to leave behind. I stood, walked across the room to my desk, and took out the copy of the new will Julian had mailed for my records. I slid it into the drawer beside Walter's letters and went to meet Helen for our Thursday watercolor class. The sky was soft with dusk as I stepped into the courtyard, a shawl wrapped loosely around my shoulders. The air held the gentle warmth of a fading spring day, and the wind stirred the tall grass in slow, even waves. I walked the stone path slowly past beds of lavender and early marigold, letting my fingers skim the edges of leaves still damp from watering. Walter used to say, "Plant what matters." It was something he whispered once while digging holes for tomatoes in our backyard dirt, on his hands, sweat on his brow. I hadn't thought much of it then, but the words had stayed. Now, walking beneath the fading light, I understood him in a way I never had before. What you plant is what you live with, and sometimes what you uproot is what sets you free. Back in my room, I opened my journal, the leather one Walter gave me for our 40th anniversary, and turned to a blank page. I began writing a letter, not to Celeste, not to Marla, but to the woman I used to be, or maybe the woman who would come after me. If you're reading this, you haven't been seen in a long time. You've bent so far for others that you forgot how to stand tall for yourself. But let me remind you, your worth is not a favor to be granted. It's a fact that doesn't vanish when people fail to recognize it. You are not here to be convenient or quiet or invisible. I signed the letter without a name because it wasn't for any one person. It was for whoever needed to remember herself. I folded the page and placed it beneath the candle on my nightstand, the one I lit each evening before bed, just for Walter. The flame flickered low, steady shore. I watched it for a while, breathing in the peace that had taken me a lifetime to earn. Then I picked up my phone. 16 missed calls. 3 new emails. 1 voice message unread. I turned it off without listening. Outside, the lights in the hallway dimmed to their nighttime glow. A nurse laughed softly down the corridor. Somewhere, a clock chimed the hour. I leaned back into Walter's old chair, pulled the shawl tighter, and closed my eyes. Not as a woman who had been left behind, but as one who had finally chosen her own ending.